Okay, we are live. Welcome everybody. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Happy Friday. Boy, it's going fast. Today is day 7 now. Richard Allen versus Indiana. We'll be covering up to yesterday and today, which I think they should be getting back from lunch now. Today they had the Firearms expert on, which we will cover that. And for anyone that's kind of newer to the channel, welcome. Usually what we do is we'll, since obviously it's still, the trial for today is still going on, and it takes a while for them to update the blogs. What I'd like to do is recap the day before, because since obviously there's no audio, video, transcripts, or anything like that, we just have journalists, writing down notes and stuff like that. And so, you're going to have certain people write down one thing and miss others, while other journalists will capture other parts of testimony. So what I do is at the end of the day, I go through and I just try to kind of put a lot of that together, and then we just kind of recap it in the beginning, and then we jump into current events. So, but yeah, again, like I said, right now they had the firearms expert with the matching the bullet that was found at the crime scene. So we'll definitely get into that. But first off, shout out to my wonderful mods coming in here. We've been going live every day, 2 to 3 hours. It's a lot, especially for usually I only go live for about an hour and a half, 3 times a week, and so we're going about 3 or 4 times that. So I do appreciate my wonderful mods. We got Mitzi, Jocelyn, Sensei, Jennifer helping out. So thank you guys so much. And of course to everybody else in here taking the time out of their day to watch the show. So we will get right into it. First thing, make sure that's working. We always like to get back by featuring missing people. Today we have, and I apologize if I butcher this last name. We have Carly Flugiman out of Batesville, Indiana. It looks like she is 11 years old. Last seen at her home in Batesville, Indiana on October 18th. So that was, what do we got? 7 days. So just a week ago. And that was this year, obviously. Around 11:30 p.m., Carly was last seen on surveillance footage at a gas station in Batesville at approximately 6:30 a.m. on October 19th. She's just 4'10", 75 pounds, brown eyes, long curly brown hair, possibly in a braided ponytail. Carly was last seen wearing a black hoodie with a white soccer ball on the front, dark striped or camouflage leggings, and black tennis shoes. So I'll zoom in. So I'm assuming that's the surveillance of the soccer hoodie. Again, this is Carly, 11 years old, went missing on October 18th, seen on surveillance on October 19th at 6:30 a.m. Not sure what she was doing. If you have any information, you can call 812-934-3131. All right, let's get into it. So let me see here. And I've got I've collected the artwork, so when we get a chance, get a break, we'll go through the artwork, these Charlie Brown art that's been produced
Teenage
by
girls,
the artist
Abby Williams and Liberty German had made less.
I'm just going to play the usual 2-minute recap while I let people kind of flood in real quick, and that way I can make sure my stream is going well. Jennifer, let me know if you can mod. I can try a couple of other things, so just let me know in chat or text me.
Teenage girls, Abby Williams and Liberty German had made last-minute plans to go to the Monon High Bridge, which was supposed to be a teenage hangout with a historic trail and a really high old abandoned bridge. The two girls, who were best friends, just had a sleepover the night before and were excited when Libby's sister, Kelsey German, said she would drop them off as long as the two girls found a ride home, which they did. Although it was February, the temperature was nice for that day, and even though it was a Monday, they had school off that day. The two girls, Abby and Libby, would be dropped off just before 2 p.m., where they planned on only staying for a couple of hours. The two teens, Abby and Libby, would begin walking the 501 trail to the Monon High Bridge. As the two would approach the bridge, Libby, who had her iPhone, would take 2 pictures, one as they passed the first platform, and another which shows Abby looking down as she is crossing the scary, tall, gap-filled railroad tie. The girls didn't know it yet, but they were not alone. As a few hours would go by, the father of Libby, Derek German, would show up, but the two girls were not at the meetup spot. Thinking that the two teens just lost track of time, he would end up calling Libby's phone. The phone was ringing, but no one was answering. He would begin searching for the two teens, but when running into other people, no one had seen them. Eventually, the authorities would be called out, and this would lead to a search party looking for the two girls. But sadly, there was no sign of them on that first night of the 13th. With the search being called off late that night for safety reasons, it would be resumed early that next day. They brought in helicopters, divers, and many other resources to scour the area. But just around noon that day, they would soon discover a grisly scene. Authorities would discover the two girls across the river, and both had sadly been murdered.
Investigators solemnly identified the two bodies found in Carroll County as 13-year-olds Libby German and Abby Williams.
We would soon get multiple press conferences, including one of the most memorable statements by Superintendent Doug Carter.
All right, guys. So that's just a 2-minute recap. 201. So for anybody that's newer to the channel, again, welcome. We kind of recap the day before, because I go over and listen to different podcasts, YouTubes, and basically just kind of collab with all their notes. And so again, we'll just kind of recap yesterday, and of course I've got visuals and stuff like that. And then we'll jump into day 7. Let me just get caught up in chat here. And if you guys can, please hit that like button. It really helps out this channel. And let's get going. We'll recap yesterday. Make sure I get this adjusted here. So obviously we had a lot going on yesterday. We had the first witness of the day is Kathy Shank. We learned basically how they uncovered the original tip, how it kind of allegedly got lost. So we'll play that, and then we'll kind of talk about some things that I heard that may have not been reported. Who volunteered to help with the case. Shank says she told police, "I would really like to help in any way I can." Hey, Fire and Ice. Shank was assigned to work as a receptionist at the old Armec building, starting on March 1st, 2017. She previously worked for Indiana DCS for 40 years before retiring. Shank said she would take tips from people who came in and pass the information to detectives upstairs. Shank said she arranged bankers' boxes of information and tips.
She said she would sort reports, label them, and put the information into file cabinets. Shank said she filled 5 filing cabinets with person of interest folders. She said a friend helped as a file clerk. Shank said they moved from the REMC building to a city building. She said she took file cabinets with her. Shank said she then entered tips into a database. Shank said Sheriff Tony Liggett was her main go-to for the case. In September 2020...
So this is so wild because it's... excuse me. According to her testimony, she started going through this again in September 2020, the month being kind of interesting because exactly 2 years later, on her late husband's birthday, which I don't think was noted in the blog, is when she found this tip, Richard Allen Whiteman.
Shank said she was asked to start scanning. Shank said the work took 2 years to complete. Shank said she entered more than 14,000 tips on the Delphi murders into the database. At 9:30 a.m., prosecuting attorney Stacy Diener asked, "Was there something that brought your attention to Richard Allen?" This was the first time Richard Allen's name had been mentioned since opening statements on Oct. 18. Shank said she found a lead sheet in a box. The sheet said that on Feb 16, 2017, a Richard Allen Whiteman had self-reported being on the trails between 1:30 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. on the day Abby and Libby went missing.
So he self-reported, because I kind of wanted to understand this. So he self-reported the day, 3 days, February 13th. They were found on the 14th. So yeah, 2 days after the bodies were found, he self-reported this timeline, 1:30 to 3:30. And then, of course, for some reason, so a lot of people thought it was Dan Dulin's fault, but it was actually basically the dispatcher, whoever received this tip, obviously put in the wrong name. And she's the one, the dispatcher apparently put cleared on it. So this wasn't even really Dan Dulin's fault.
Missing. According to Shank, Allen had reported seeing 3 girls.
Hey,
Shank said she remembered seeing another tip that a man had been on the trail. Shank said she compared the tip to the file that had Richard Allen's name in it. Shank said she didn't know how the tip or lead sheet had gotten into that box. Shank said the narrative summary in the database said that Allen had been interviewed. The file had the word "cleared" on it. It also had a green mark that indicated it was cleared. Shank said she took the file to Liggett. Shank said she pulled the written tip about Allen being interviewed in 2017 and changed the file name to Richard Allen. She told the jury she made this discovery on September 21st, 2022.
So again, that's so wild that she started this in September of 2020, going through all these tips. And then literally 2 years later, and I think they had mentioned this was like on her late husband's birthday, that she had found this tip, which is really wild.
Shank told the jury that her job was not to decide if a tip should be followed up on, that she simply was tasked with organizing.
So obviously what was interesting to note that was going on at that time was the Wabash River search, for those who are familiar with this case. Obviously, before we learned of Richard Allen, it was basically the Kagan Klein show. Everybody thought he had to have something to do with this case just because he had made up this fake profile, Anthony Schatz, and he was doing very terrible stuff, getting, CSAM from young girls, catfishing them. But what was interesting is they learned that he was actually speaking to Libby's friends, and then allegedly Libby herself, according to the transcript, the detective said that he even spoke to Libby through this profile on the day of February 13th. And then in August 19th of 2022, they would go search this Wabash River in Peru, which is northeast of Delphi. And they believed that this, there was a weapon and a phone connected to the Delphi case that was in the river. Now, from what we understand, they never found anything. But they started on August 19th. It was a 5-week ordeal, and I think it ended. I'm not sure the exact date. I want to say September 28th, but it was around in there. So obviously, just around the time that she's discovering this Richard Allen tip.
Defense attorney Andrew Baldwin began cross-examination. Baldwin asked Schenck if she knew if the information in the file was accurate.
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead, Wicked. We will get into that. Obviously, we're recapping yesterday, so I don't want to jump ahead. But yeah, if you want to hang around for a minute while we recap yesterday, obviously we'll get into what's going on today, and then we'll of course go through chat and stuff like that.
Schenck said she did not know. Baldwin said there is no Richard Allen Whiteman, which was the name in the file. Schenck said it wasn't me who wrote Richard Allen Whiteman. Baldwin asked Schenck.
Obviously, this was the dispatcher that received the self-report by Richard Allen. So we'll kind of skip this and then kind of get into Dan Dulin a little bit.
The original lead sheet was shown to the jury, where Allen's name was written Rick Allen Whiteman. Dulin said he called Allen by phone. Dulin said Allen didn't want to meet at his home or a law enforcement agency. Dulin said instead Allen wanted to meet at a grocery store parking lot.
And well, actually, I've got a clip of the grocery store that they went to here in just a minute. Of course, this is part of this is AI reading it out, so I apologize. I know it's saying Dulin, but it's Dulin. But again, I have an issue. I don't know why Allen couldn't meet at his home or at the law enforcement agency. Obviously, it's a very small town. It would only take a few minutes to go into the sheriff's office or wherever they conduct their interviews. But instead they meet at a grocery store parking lot, and then people have a problem with Dulin not recording it. Obviously, I think this is before everybody was wearing body cams. Obviously it would be a lot different today. I'm assuming most officers now have, the body cam, where they, like within the Stephen Stearns case, in Madeline Soto's case, with Stephen Stearns. A lot of his interviews, some of their interviews are obviously captured on body cam, but unfortunately, they didn't have that at the time, so he's just writing down what Richard Allen is telling him.
Dulin said they met, and Allen said he had been on the trail between 1:30 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. Dulin said Allen reported seeing 3 girls at the Freedom Bridge at the start of his hike, but no one else. Dulin said Allen said he walked to the Freedom Bridge, and then toward the Monon High Bridge. Dulin said Allen told him he was looking at a stock ticker on his phone as he walked. Dulin said the interview lasted about 10 minutes and was not recorded. Dulin said he just took written notes. Dulin said he asked for the phone number and driver's license number of Richard Allen. That would mean the state had Richard Allen's info within 4 days of the murders. The jury was shown Dulin's notes and Allen's driver's license picture, along with a lead sheet with Dulin's interview. Dulin said in September 2022, he received a call from Steve Mullin asking if he remembered talking with Richard Allen. Dulin said he then did more research and found Richard Allen's fishing license information. He told the jury that on April 1st, 2017, Allen changed his height on his fishing license from 5'4" to 5'6" and decreased his weight.
Now, I really think that's just somebody, a man who's kind of maybe, he's a shorter guy and he just, just wants to buff up his height. I don't think this has anything to do with him, because obviously, if anything, he would be fitting more into that 5'6" to 5'10", or I can't remember if it's 5'6" or 5'8" to 5'10". I think it varied at some point, but I really think this is just, a stigma where, just a guy's kind of shorter and just wanted to, add a couple inches to his height. I don't think this was anything to do with hiding his identity or, his height and weight. The weight was only, I think, 13 pounds. I've heard 15, so 13 to 15, because I've heard two different.
Dulin said that
somewhere in
stuck
there.
out because it was an uncommon thing to increase height 2 inches. Carroll County Prosecutor Nick McClelland asked Dulin to identify Allen in the courtroom.
Thank you so much, Firearms. Yep.
Brad Rossi conducted the cross-examination on Dan Dulin. Rossi said he, Allen, came forward, right? Dulin said, yes. Rossi said, he told you he was on his way to the grocery store?
Obviously, it's Rosie, but again, this is because I'm doing multiple things when I'm recapping, so I just kind of type this out and let AI kind of fill in a lot of this stuff here. So most of the time, it gets names good. It's pretty good with names, but unfortunately, Dulin and Rosie or Dulin and Rosie.
Dulin said he didn't remember, but that was possible. Rossi asked Dulin to confirm that Allen said he was on the trail between 1:30 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. Dulin said, yes. Do you know how long he was there? Rossi asked. Dulin said he interpreted Allen's statement to mean he was on the trail the whole time, based on the interview. Rossi asked, there was nothing that struck you as unusual, was there, about the interview? Dulin said no, that there was nothing that would lead him to report Allen to law enforcement. Dulin said the part that stood out to him was Allen saying he was on his phone on the trail. Rossi said that Dulin said nothing stood out during his deposition. He asked if Dulin was suggesting Allen was using an alias. When he asked again, the prosecution objected. Rossi then said that Dulin did not ask Allen what Allen was wearing or what Allen was driving. Dulin said that was correct. Dulin said he was confident that Allen parked at the old DCS building.
And that's pretty big. So we're going to look at the grocery store that they met up here. I found a little short clip from the news here. So I'm going to play that for you guys here.
The man who's accused of killing Abby Williams and Libby German more than 7.5 years ago. Thanks for inviting us in at 6 o'clock. The state today tried to place Richard Allen at the scene of the murders.
It's been a really busy day of testimony, and this...
I don't think they tried. I think Richard Allen placed himself there.
This was over the first time that Allen was interviewed about being on the trail at the time and the day of the murders. Bob Siegel spent the day outside the courtroom. And Bob, this is really interesting testimony. Tell us and walk us through what you heard.
Yeah, Ann and Scott, today jurors learned how it is that investigators zeroed in on Richard Allen. And it all ties back to a statement that Allen gave police just 3 days after the murders. Today, jurors learned that Allen met with an investigator here at this Delphi grocery store after he voluntarily called the Delphi murders tip line to say that he had been...
See that? Okay, so this is old footage. And I thought this was a great clip. See how there's this kind of like barricade thing that they've got, and they just had to walk around it. Betsy Blair said she was standing around that thing, if I recall. I'm pretty sure. Correct me if I'm wrong in chat, but I'm pretty sure that's what she testified, that she was around this thing here. And And now look when we see where platform 1 is.
On the Monon trails, not far from the crime scene, on the afternoon of the murders.
Look at that. Now, they're clearly taking a picture in front of that, barrier, whatever that thing is. That is platform 1. I mean, think about trying, to get an exact description, obviously that's quite a bit of ways away to make, a very detailed description. And even Betsy said, it was 50 feet away. I only saw him for a brief second. He looked at me as if he was waiting for someone, which wasn't me, clearly. And clearly it spooked her. I mean, I know that's where she would turn around anyway, because we learned that she does her loops. But still, I mean, I think people take too much stock in these sketches, and they're all so different because, that's just, everybody's going to perceive something different, especially if they're just seeing them for a brief second. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
A DNR officer testified about what Allen told him. Allen said he was on the trails between 1:30 and 3:30 on the days of the murders. He saw 3 girls walking on the trails. He was focused on his cell phone, and the officer said there was nothing about Allen that struck him as unusual. In fact, following that interview, investigators said that Allen was cleared. Investigators forgot him. They testified today that his statement got lost, and in their words, they said that it fell through the cracks until a file clerk.
Rosie asked if someone can register a fishing license for someone else. Dulin said, yes. Rosie asked if there were several references on previous licenses to Allen being fired.
So this is where that Save-A-Lot is. It's a 5-minute walk away. So here's CVS where Richard Allen was working, and this is the Save-A-Lot. So if anyone was wondering where they met up, there it is. And then you could probably see CVS. Oh, yep, CVS is right there. Oops, went down the street. So you can see where they met and the difference.
5-6. Dulin said, yes. Rosie said that during deposition, Dulin said he didn't think Allen was trying to be deceptive with license information. Dulin said that was correct.
Yeah, I swear, that's what I heard. And I think one, because obviously, like I said multiple times, one journalist is going to capture, certain words and phrases. Other journalists are going to capture others. Some may match, obviously, and then some may miss others. And yeah, I remember I was like, she said she stopped at the barrier, and I'm like, man, that barrier is like quite a bit of ways compared to platform 1. Like, again, no wonder she probably thought he was in his early 20s and 30s. She can only see, we don't know if he still had his mask up. Maybe he had taken his, because we know when he passed the witnesses, he had some kind of scarf or I forget the other term for it, but covering up to his nose. And usually the people that cross this bridge are younger, teenagers. So no wonder she's thinking he's in his early 20s or 30s.
Correct. Dulin said he went to the crime scene multiple times, including early on. Dulin said his first time was on Feb 17 when he saw sticks and branches piled up at the crime scene. He said the sticks had blood on them, but the crime scene had been released. That means there was still crime scene tape up, but it was not secured by police. Dulin said he called the investigative center to report sticks with blood, and someone came to get the sticks.
So that
Rosie
was
asked if
the
he saw
sticks that were on the girls, for those that don't know. In my opinion, and of course with the prosecution and the detectives, they believe the sticks were placed on the girl to try to conceal them, and there would probably been more, maybe even leaves placed on them, but maybe something such as like Brad Weber coming home at 3:30, driving on the access road, which, that timing is very interesting because we know not long after that, the suspect seen at 356 walking north on Country Road, or walking west on the north side of the road. So that means he would have had to have left shortly around 3:30 or, around in that time frame. So I think he was probably trying to cover up the scene. And as Brad Weber came home, I've shown where, you can see from where the crime scene's at, you can see the access road. And so I'm sure that spooked the shit out of the killer. And he probably is like, okay, I got to get out of here. That's just my opinion, of course. Jennifer, thank you so much for everything you do. God bless you. Thank you so much for the support. Hopefully we get your mod situation fixed. And then thank you to Carol, who donated through Venmo. God bless you. I appreciate that. Deer stand in the area. Dulin said he did. Rozzy asked if it is unusual to find an unspent shell casing in the woods. He asked if Dulin told him it was not unusual during deposition. Dulin said that was correct. Rozzy asked if the Sig Sauer was a popular gunmaker, and if Smith Wesson ammunition was popular. Dulin said yes. Rozzy asked if Dulin was able to find the IP address, email, and credit card used to purchase Allen's fishing license. Dulin said yes. It was paid for with Allen's credit card, but he didn't know what username was used. So I'm going to skip this a little bit forward here. So I'm just showing part of this. I'm not going to show all of this. Obviously, I have a full visual timeline with, on the road and where these witnesses were at. But basically, Allen's statement to Dulin, we've gone over it many times, but just one last time here. Mr. Allen was on the trail between 1:30 and 3:30. He parked at the old Farm Bureau building, which he actually meant is the CPS building. He walked to the Freedom Bridge, which is what you're looking at. While at the Freedom Bridge, he saw 3 females. Now, of course, there was 4, but it could be easily that one was just got overlooked because, there was a younger sister. So maybe she was much shorter and maybe behind the girls. And so he didn't even see the other witness. But again, he even gave some descriptions about these girls. And he said he did not speak with them. And that he was on his phone looking at a stock ticker. And so if you think about that, that would mean he'd have his head down. And what's interesting is the girls respond saying, Riley said hi to him because she says hi to everybody. It's a small town. A lot of people know each other. She said hi to him. He did not respond back, which, of course, corresponds with what he said. He said he did not speak with them. She said he had his head down. All of them, more or less said the same thing. Head down, walking with a purpose. And, if you were allegedly looking at your phone with the stock ticker, you would have your head down. So it's just like, to me, I think Allen was like telling 90% of the truth. Just left out, certain details, in my opinion. Of course, we only heard from 2 out of the 4 witnesses. We didn't hear from Anna or Riley's other sister. This is what they described, that he had some kind of, they didn't use, what's the word they used? Not scarf, but, something to cover his mouth up to his nose. And then some kind of hat, beanie. According to Allen, he was wearing a skull cap, and then he had a hood on. And this is something that I keep meaning to do, and I'm going to probably do it this weekend. Is it'd be interesting to see like putting a bunch of layers on, and with the hoodie, and because obviously when you have a bunch of layers on, especially with like a hood that kind of isn't like, skin tight, and has some breathing room, obviously it's going to make him look taller. And then if he has his head down, maybe the girls were trying to compensate for his height because he's kind of hunched down and thought he was much taller than he really was. And then, of course, he's going to appear slightly muscular because he's got all these layers on. Again, just my opinion, of course. Yeah, gator. They didn't use the word gator, but yeah, that's what I was thinking. I forget what they used. But yeah, that's what more or less. A gator. I want to say like something mask or something like that. But yeah. And then again, just of course, he said that he walked out to platform 1, and then there's Betsy Blair, who says, "Oh, she sees someone standing on platform 1." But again, the big issue is he claims he had his phone, he was on the stock ticker, but yet there is when they geofence, there was no data for him, period. And then, of course, we learned on day 5 that when they searched his home, they had 23 phones going all the way back to the Nokia days. But yet the phone that he allegedly had in 2017 is gone. I do have, and then even Betsy, or actually, yeah, I think Betsy too, but the jury asked Betsy that, because she said she saw curly brown hair, could she have mistaken that for like a brown beanie or hat or something like that? Which I thought was genius. It sounds like these jurors are clearly paying attention. Yeah, it was like, something like a biker mask. I don't think it was biker, but yeah, it's something like that. But yeah, more or less it's a gator. There's quite a few different times. Running mask, that's what it was. Thank you, Cody. Yeah, I'm like, there was something that, because I think of gator. But yeah, running mask. Thank you so much.
Former Delphi police chief and current investigator.
Okay, so obviously we're getting about halfway of yesterday. Then we had Steve Mullin, who's now, this is his third time being on the stand. He went back to the Hoosier Harv store where, there's a camera, and he had obviously checked off the people that said they were there at certain times. And then he went to look through the footage, and what does he see? Of course, a vehicle at 127, which appears to be, looks like a 2016 black Ford Focus.
For the Carroll County Prosecutor's Office, Steve Mullin, returns to the stand. Mullin said he was called by Sheriff Liggett on November 21, 2022, about Dulin's report on Allen. Mullin said he found Allen had a 2006 Ford 500 and a 2016 black Ford Focus. Mullin said he checked video from the Hoosier Harvest store to see if he could find video of Allen's car. Mullin said he then went to the CVS where Allen worked to take a picture of his license plate.
Yeah, I try to remind myself to tell the viewers, yes, of course, I don't know if I mentioned it today, but yeah, for those who are newer to the channel, I have bias because I feel like once that probable cause affidavit came out, I feel like the timeline matched up with Richard Allen. I feel like he's the right fit, because we were covering this case years before they caught Richard Allen, and, we were looking at all these persons of interest, not in, obviously, publicly, not officially persons of interest, and we couldn't ever get a connection, a real nexus fit. But then when Richard Allen comes along, it's like, bam, this 1:30 to 3:30, that is literally the time frame that the killer, basically was there, except really it's kind of 1:30 to 4, or a little bit after, but more or less that is, 1:30 is like spot on when the killer arrives. And then, just like Doug Carter said, it was going to be somebody hiding in plain sight, probably a local. And then we're going to learn because later yesterday they talked about the search warrant, and there's some very interesting stuff. This is why I always like to recap the day before, because there's always stuff that wasn't mentioned in the blogs and stuff that they talked about in the search warrant. So, of course, we'll be getting into that.
Mullin said in the review of the video at the Hoosier Harvest store, he saw Allen's car pull in at 1:27 p.m. on February 13, 2017. Mullin clarified it was his opinion that it was Allen's car based on facts of size, color, shape, etc.
Oh, thank you so much, Jamie.
The jury was shown frame-by-frame video showing the vehicle that passed by the Hoosier Harvest store. You cannot see the license plate or driver in the video. Mullin pointed out some features that led him to believe it is Allen's car in the video. Hatchback profile of the taillights, the bumper, the black sports-type rims with distinctive spokes.
Again, I think obviously the rims, I don't know if they're stock rim. If you get, black sports type stock rims when you get a black Ford Focus, again, that was something I wanted to look up, but something tells me I doubt it, but I could be wrong. Again, that's definitely something that's unique about that car. Just having that car alone, regardless of the rims, it is a black Ford Focus 2016 hatchback. I've had friends that had Ford Focuses. I actually had a Mercury Tracer 2007, which is really because Mercury and Ford, same company. And a Mercury Tracer is basically, just another, it's more or less a Ford Focus. Like, it's funny because when I had the Mercury Tracer, and I didn't know, I'm not a big expert in cars, but, when I'd open up the hood, everything's, Ford, and even inside the car, there's stuff that says Ford, anyway. So, Ford Focuses have had, they've definitely changed their shapes throughout the generations. And this one's, very unique because it's more, kind of, hatchback, PT Cruiser, a little bit more smaller. And, yeah, much different from the generations prior, basically.
Mullin said the arrival matches when Allen told Dulin he arrived. Mullin said on Oct 13, 2022. He drove to Allen's home and spoke to him at his home with the sheriff. Mullin said they told Allen he wasn't under arrest. Mullin said he took Allen to the police station with Allen's consent in an unmarked car. He said he read Allen his Miranda rights. According to Mullin, Allen said he went to his mother's house in Peru on February 13, 2017. He said he left his mom's house at 11 a.m. and then got his jacket and went to the trails. Allen allegedly told Mullin that he passed 3 girls and was looking at a stock ticker on his phone when walking towards the Monon High Bridge. Mullin said Allen said he arrived at the trail by noon and left at 1:30 p.m. Mullin said Allen...
So now he's obviously brought in, doing an interview. Now, all of a sudden, even though it's been 5.5 years, now he knows he was there from noon to 1:30. Obviously, your memory, would be worse as it goes on as to events that happened. So I thought that's interesting. And of course, the noon to 1:30, I've shown it's ridiculous. And I don't think Allen was thinking about it because I don't think he knew that there's these witnesses, these same witnesses that he ran into. They're there between basically noon and 1:30. And so they should have been like right on each other's butt the entire time, and they should have both been at the bridge, but they never claimed seeing Richard Allen at the bridge, these juvenile witnesses. And then, of course, if he's leaving at 1:30 at the old CPS building, well, guess who's arriving at that time? The suspect. So he should have, at the very least, ran into Bridge Guy. So again, and that's why, in my opinion, the defense in their opening statements, even though they mentioned, yeah, he left the trails at 1:30, minutes later, they just kind of slip in, yeah, well, Richard Allen left in his car around 2:15. So, I don't know what the hell he's doing for 45 minutes. He's left the trails at 1:30, but he hasn't left in his vehicle until 2:15. So clearly I know they're doing that to, try to salvage some kind of timeline and, kind of make up a story, in my opinion. But again, I think he shot himself in the foot again by saying noon to 1:30 because obviously Allen didn't know that they had metadata with these girls at certain time frames.
Allen claimed he went to the first platform of the bridge and looked at fish. Allen allegedly told Mullin that he saw girls near the start of the trail, and they passed him, going in the opposite direction, as he walked towards the Monon High Bridge. Mullin said Allen told him he was driving his 2016 Ford Focus. Mullin said Allen told him he was on the trail for about an hour. Mullin said Allen told him that Allen had told Allen's wife he was on the trails the day of the murders. Allen allegedly told Mullin he was wearing a black or blue jacket, jeans.
So that's interesting. I was just kind of thinking about that. So he says he's on the trail for an hour. Noon to 1:30 is obviously an hour and a half. Now their defense is saying that he's there. He doesn't leave until 2:15, which is 2 hours and 15 minutes, or 2 hours if you just want to kind of round it out. So again, another thing where they're just getting caught in all these, issues that they're just making it worse for themselves. Fire and Ice, bless you. Thank you so much for becoming a member and supporting this channel. I appreciate it. Welcome to have you.
A skull cap, and military boots. Mullin said Allen originally agreed to show investigators his phone, then changed his mind. Mullin said Allen got irritated and left the room. Mullin said he showed Allen a picture of the bridge guy and asked if Allen was the man in the picture. Mullin said Allen's answer was strange. He said Allen said, if the picture was taken with the girl's camera, there was no way it could be him. Mullin said he took Allen home and then applied for a search warrant. The court broke for lunch at 12:10 p.m. Mullin will be cross-examined when it resumes.
Okay, so we're about a little more than halfway through yesterday, and of course we'll start getting into today. But there was some very interesting stuff that, because they get into what they recovered from his home, and there were some things that I got from Murder Sheet and some other things, and I thought this was very interesting.
Defense attorney Andrew Baldwin started the cross-examination. You are so desperate to place Richard Allen's car traveling west on 300N that just before lunch you lied to this jury.
Okay, so now by listening to a bunch of people, figured out what was going on there, and apparently this was really awkward because he was trying to, I guess he was trying to perjure, Andrew Baldwin, the defense attorney, was trying to perjure Mullin, and what he was referring to is that Allen takes a certain route, usually. But then after reading his transcript, he didn't really perjure himself. He just kind of said it in a different way, from what I understand. And it was really an awkward moment, and it didn't go anywhere. The defense was trying to, get a win, but I think it fell through.
Baldwin said. Baldwin provided a transcript that showed that Allen may have gone west on 300N on February 17. Baldwin accused Mullin of presenting his interpretation of Allen's statement as fact. We had already surmised it was his vehicle, Mullin said. Wanted him to confirm it. Baldwin said that Allen said he drove through town on his regular route, a loop to 300W eastbound. Mullin said that Allen said it was his possible route. Yes. Baldwin recounted Mullin's deposition regarding the interview and Allen's route to the trails. According to the deposition, Mullin asked Allen twice if he took a different route to the trails. Allen ultimately told Mullin if he was going to the park, he'd go through town. Words matter, Baldwin said. Words on the stand matter, especially when words impact the timeline in a case like this. Mullin
But it's
agreed.
not really the timeline. It's from what I understand, they're just talking about how Allen's route, how he normally takes for certain places. And it really doesn't have anything to do with February 13th, in my opinion. Other than that, they're trying to say, well, Allen would have taken this way instead of coming this way or whatever. But still, to me, it's, I don't know. I think what the defense was
Allen
doing
also
fell
told
through.
you could have been driving his other car that day, Baldwin said. Yes, Mullin agreed. You didn't tell the jury that, did you? Baldwin asked. For your theory to work, Baldwin said. Richard Allen's car would have to be at the CPS lot between 1:30 and 4, right? Yes, Mullin said. Is there anything that would contradict that? Baldwin asked. No, Mullin said. What about information from Betsy Blair? Does this look like a 1965 Mercury Comet?
And so, again, this is going to fall through. I know the defense is going to bring this back up, and this is going to fall through so fast because, and I'm sure they've done their homework. Let's see, I just have to show this at 2:30:23. And this is why this Mercury Comet is so irrelevant, and I'll tell you why. 2:23. Sorry, I've got a lot of stuff here. Oh, and we are about right somewhere in here. So when Betsy Blair goes through... Sorry, there's a lot here. Let me just play it here because I know it's going to pop up real fast. Okay, now this isn't the best one, but anyway, because you can't see the names. Obviously, I should have made this smaller. Okay, I had noted every person that was arriving and leaving. That was noted in the PC affidavit. And the one thing I noticed, that the three witnesses that mentioned seeing cars, they all mention it when they are going basically west north, because obviously it curves going west up north. And no one ever mentioned seeing the car when they were coming southeast, which tells me obviously it was hidden pretty well out of view if you were coming south. But anyway, long story short is even though you have Betsy Blair saying, oh yeah, I see this Mercury Comet at 2:14, you have another witness coming around 14 minutes later saying they see a dark smart car. No mention of a Mercury Comet. And then before Betsy, there's another person that said at 2:10, 4 minutes prior, said they saw a purple SUV. Both cars look like a small hatchback type car. So again, she's in the middle. If she was at the end out of these three witnesses, maybe there would be a little bit more weight to this Mercury Comet. But again, you have a witness that sees a dark smart car 14 minutes after her, and there's no mention of Mercury Comet. So I really think she did see probably a Mercury Comet. But she either saw it earlier when she was doing her rounds, or there was a guy in between just maybe turning around in that area. Again, that's just my theory on that, of course, mixed with facts with the witness statements. Okay, back to where we left off. We're about to get into what they took from his home, and there's some very interesting stuff that was mentioned that I heard last night from a podcast.
Is there anything that would contradict that? Baldwin asked. No, Mullin said. What about information from Betsy Blair? Does this look like a 1965 Mercury comet? Baldwin asked. The prosecution objected, which was sustained. Were you the investigator who lost evidence? Baldwin asked. The prosecution again objected, and it was again sustained. Baldwin asked if Mullin was in an interview where Allen said he didn't remember which way he took to the trail. Mullin said yes. Baldwin asked if Mullin investigated how many black 2016 Ford Focuses were registered in Carroll County in 2017. Mullin said no.
Yeah, I wish he would have done that. Keep in mind, I mean, I'd have to look up Carroll County, but obviously I doubt there isn't a lot. I'm sure it's a more popular car than others, but still, again, what are the chances a black Ford Focus is going by at 127? Richard Allen originally claims he's there at 1:30. You would arrive at CPS building at approximately 1:30. You know, clearly, in my opinion, he was telling the truth from the beginning. And just like a lot of killers, they insert themselves into the investigation. And that's, I think, what he did. And I think he's really his worst own enemy.
Baldwin asked if Mullin looked to see if his, Allen's, other car was on video.
Is it? I want to say Lisa, but it looks like there's another L. I think it's Lisa. If I said it wrong, thank you so much. I have to start at the beginning for your maps and stuff, but thanks for putting it together for us. Yeah, I do. I have other lives where I've gone through the timeline, and yes, if you'd like to check out those, and of course they're visual timelines, to give you the full picture of what it looks like. From above and on the ground as well. And that's what I like to do is kind of give visuals. Miss Dog Lover, good to see you. Forgive me if I'm wrong. I don't want to spread misinformation. But is it true that the defense are calling the Kleins and Chadwell? Yes, they are. That is true. I'm sure probably people already answered it. If so, for what reason? Definitely Kagan Klein at the moment. The Kagan Klein, I'm going to go on a limb with the Kagan Klein. I'm assuming they're going to try, because, of course, you know, they said that he spoke to Libby the day of, so I'm sure they're going to try to go somewhere with that, saying that maybe he had some kind of connection or knows the killer. Now, Chadwell, that's a great question. I am not sure what they're going to do with Chadwell. Yeah, that's very interesting. And they've got a few others as well.
2:08 p.m. The state's 23rd witness is Carroll County Sheriff Tony Liggett. He was serving as a detective at the time of the murders. Liggett said he wanted to talk to the person who passed Brianne Wilbur and Rayleigh Voorhees. He knew they were a male.
Yeah.
We believe that was Bridge Guy, Liggett said. Liggett said he watched the video taken from Libby's phone hundreds of times.
Okay, so now what we found out is that, remember, I think on day 4, I believe it was, that they played the video now, and then they played it again yesterday. And now we learned that the video that they played the first time was the unenhanced version, just the original version, and I think in like split up or something like that, or trimmed down, something like that. And so that's why a lot of people couldn't really understand or see Bridge Guy, because it was the unenhanced version. yesterday, they actually finally played the enhanced version. So everybody was able to see Bridge Guy and hear, much more about what was said in the video. So here's my recreation. Again, I added some more things in that, that now people could hear. Again, this is not a one-to-one recreation, but this is just to kind of give you an idea. I want to do another one when I have more time, so I'm going to probably do it this weekend to kind of give a little bit better depiction of how it may have went down. So here it is.
Is he right here? Don't leave me up here.
See, this is the path. There's no path down here. We've got to go down here. That be a gun.
This is freaking me out. Hi. Huh?
And so now that's basically a kind of a mix between the original and enhanced. But the original, obviously, when Bridge Guy is being filmed, she had turned the camera upside down, so he was actually being filmed upside down. But yeah, that's basically these poor girls, starting with Abby saying, "Is he still there?" Let me play it one more time for you guys.
Alan's other car was on video. 2:08 p.m. The state's 23rd witness, Brianne Wilbur and Rayleigh Voorhees. He knew they were a male. "We believe that was Bridge Guy," Liggett said. Liggett said he watched the video taken from Libby's phone hundreds of times.
Is he right here? Don't leave me up here.
Yeah, so that's Abby. Is he right there? Don't leave me up here. Terrible to hear that. And then Libby responds with this.
See, this is the path. There's no path down here. We've got to go down here. That be a gun.
And then I thought, originally it was thought that Abby was the one that said something about a gun, but I believe they're saying that it was Libby now that says that be a gun or something like that. And then during this, you can see Libby and you can actually see Bridge Guy, coming up behind her pretty quickly. And she runs forward.
This is freaking me out.
Yelling, "This is freaking me out." And then that's when Bridge Guy gets captured on video.
Hi.
He says, "Guys," I think one or both girls say hi. And then some people have used the term metallic sound, which is obviously the gun being cocked. And then the final phrase. And then the video ends. Which is truly,
according to Liggett,
heartbreaking.
People said the vehicle on video at the Hoosier Harvest store was backed in. Liggett said when they went to CVS to look for Alan's car, it was backed in. Alan had a lifetime handgun permit. Liggett said Alan admitted to being on the trails on February 13 but changed his story. Alan initially said he was on the trail between 1:30 and 3:30 p.m. Then, Liggett said Alan changed the time frame to noon to 1:30 p.m. He was kind of wishy-washy about where he parked, Liggett said of Alan. Liggett said they found Alan's .40 Sig Sauer handgun in a bedroom nightstand. Liggett said that was the same caliber of bullet found between the bodies of Abby and Libby. Liggett said they found another .40 Winchester round in a keepsake box in a bedroom dresser. They found more .40 caliber Blazer ammunition. Liggett said they also found a blue Carhartt jacket in the main entry closet. Liggett said the guns found during the search were sent to a lab. The ATF traced the guns and found they belonged to Alan and no one else. During cross-examination, Brad Rossi noted that Liggett was the chief deputy when Allen was arrested. Rossi said Liggett was running for sheriff in the 2022 election.
And I think this, of course, Murder Sheet talked about this, how this was, of course, the defense people, not all the defense, but, some of these more deep believers with Richard Allen's innocent and the corruption they believe in. I think this was all done for an election. But Murder Sheet talked about how, this particular area is I believe, a red area. Obviously I'm going to get into politics, but it's normal for that kind of group to be elected, and obviously he's part of that group. And so, and it was a landslide, obviously, when it came to the voting, and they believed it had nothing to do, and it would have changed the outcome either way, and just thought this was really just almost, I was going to say below the belt, but that's not the term they use, but, just felt this wasn't necessary.
Liggett noted there was a $50,000 raise that came with moving from chief deputy to sheriff. Rosie asked Liggett if he ever thought how an arrest would benefit him. Liggett said it had nothing to do with him. He said it was about 2 little girls who were murdered. Rosie questioned the integrity of the crime scene.
And then Rosie actually had the cojones to bring up talking about crime scene pictures being leaked. And guess who's the ones responsible? Not directly, but their office, Baldwin's office. I can't believe he would bring that up. The defense bringing that up about pictures being leaked.
Saying pictures of the scene were leaked.
It's crazy.
Liggett said he thought the sticks on the bodies were for concealment. He said, nobody saw them. Rosie asked about witnesses who saw the bridge guy. Rosie said the search warrant was based on a timeline of seeing a man on the trail. Rosie noted one witness described the bridge guy as tall and muscular. Liggett said that he understood why witness Sarah Carbaugh said she was panicked. 2 girls were killed, Liggett said. I can understand that panic.
And then, just not to get sidetracked, but, there's, of course, Sarah Carbaugh's going to be called back by the defense, but she was kind of a crowd favorite when she testified the other day, because she came off very honest. She didn't want to be there. And I thought it was so interesting that some of these more, pro-Allen certain types said that, oh, well, Sarah Carbaugh, just wants the attention, when she literally waited 3 weeks to even come forward. I mean, that doesn't sound like, to me, somebody that wants the attention. It sounds like they didn't want anything to do with this, and she mentions that several times. This just obviously doesn't look good for, Richard Allen, because, she's the one that spotted a muddy and bloody guy. But anyway, I just think it's kind of ridiculous. Oh yeah, they have a defense literally sitting with, the defense has a YouTuber, a certain Bob Mata, literally, and then
Rosie and Liggett discussed there were many dark Ford Focuses.
But it's
Liggett
not going to be up.
Know how many
it's not up to the public anymore. It's up to these 12 jurors, and of course they sound, very smart and responsible, and I'm sure they will look at all the evidence and do the right thing,
The kind of rims seen on the video. Rosie asked if Liggett would be surprised to learn Ford mass-produced them. Liggett said no. Rosie asked if Liggett was aware that in 2019 Indiana State Police soap throwers.
No, I would say that may be a slight win for, mentioning that these rims are mass-produced for the Ford Focuses. still at the end of the day, it's a Ford Focus, a black Ford Focus at 127, in a town with less than 3,000 people, and Richard Allen owned one of them.
Carter relieved the FBI of duties with the case. Liggett said no, and that he would be surprised. Richard Allen was never a suspect from 2017 to 2022, Rosie said. Liggett said Allen got lost and fell in the cracks. Rosie said that a 5-year delay would impact the memory of Allen, witnesses, and Allen's wife. Do you believe Richard Allen acted alone in this case? Rosie asked. Yes, Liggett said. Rosie asked if Liggett always believed Allen acted alone. Liggett said, yes. Rosie asked, there has never been any DNA of Richard Allen collected at the crime scene? None, Liggett said. Rosie asked if there was any digital evidence linking.
I mean, if people in the gallery thought that she came off credible, then obviously that's going to relate to the jurors, I would think, right? I mean, that's just my opinion, of course, but I mean, I wasn't there, so I can't say, but that was the term coined, crowd favorite, best witness so far. There was a bunch of terms. Obviously, you could tell when somebody's being honest. She's calling herself a cowardly lion, not a cowardly liar, because that was, again, that's why I like to go through the day before, because there's stuff that gets misquoted, and even I misquote stuff because we're humans.
Allen to the
We're
scene.
not perfect.
Liggett said, no. That man held himself out for law enforcement 3 days after the murders, Rosie said. Liggett said, yes. Rosie said that Allen didn't flee the community. Liggett said he was hiding in plain sight. Rosie said it was the bullet that led to the arrest of Allen. Liggett said, that's what put us over the hump.
And he said more than that. Obviously, there was much more. Allen put himself there. Again, Allen himself is his worst own enemy, and we haven't even gotten to the confessions yet. But we now are going to get to, I think he's almost done with Liggett, and then we're going to get into what they took from his home. And there are some very, very interesting and disturbing things, in my opinion, that were at his home that we need to talk about.
Rosie said that witness Betsy Blair told police she saw a man who was boyish and beautiful with brown, poofy hair. She described the man as in his 20s or 30s.
There's one thing that I've noticed. There's a lot of the witness, not all of them, but there's a lot of them that mention some kind of curly hair. You know, Sarah Carbaugh, Betsy Blair, and then one of the witnesses, I believe, even said it looked like curly hairs coming out. In my opinion, I wonder if this guy was even went as far as to wear like some kind of wig, you know, with these brown curly hairs coming out. Let me know what you think in chat, but I would not put it past this killer that, obviously, because a lot of people mention brown a lot, brown curly, and so I do wonder if maybe had like a wig, hat on over that, hat or beanie, whatever, and then of course the hood up, and yeah.
Her description does not match the description of Richard
I would agree
Allen,
with that.
Rosie said.
I would agree.
But
yeah.
neither do the 3 girls who saw
some
him on
sloppy
the trail,
stuff.
Liggett said. Exactly, Rosie said. Right. During a heated exchange over the timeline, Rosie accused Liggett of making up details of the story. Liggett said a lab told him that if they had a Sig Sauer or Smith Wesson, they could match the bullet to a gun. During redirect, Carroll County prosecutor Nick McClelland asked Liggett if Allen's memory in 2017 about the timeline likely the most accurate. Liggett agreed. During cross redirect, Rozzy asked if it was likely Bestie Blair's 2017 memory of a man in his early 20s was the most accurate.
I didn't even realize that when copying and pasting this, that they put Bestie. They typed it, mistyped it.
Liggett said,
That's funny.
Yes. The state's 24th witness is Indiana State Police Detective Dave Veto.
Okay, this to me is huge. In my opinion, I think this is kind of the bombshell at the end of the day for yesterday, and then we'll get into the day 7. But obviously, I took a lot of things from his home. We've gone through it. But there's a lot of things that we didn't hear about, especially about photos taken. And there's one thing, there's a couple things, but this one right here.
Who helped search Allen's home. Veto showed 28 photos he took during the search of Allen's property, with a focus on where weapons and ammunition were found. More than 25 knives and box cutters were taken, along with several phones and pagers.
There is mention, now of course I listened to a bunch of different podcasts, there is mentions box cutters, I don't want to say like everywhere and be misquoted, but it more or less sounded like there's box cutters everywhere. Like in the garage, in the kitchen or somewhere else. A lot of box cutters. And honestly, it doesn't surprise me because I told you guys I worked in retail for 8 years. Longer than that, but 8 years at one place. And my main tool was a box cutter. Now, of course, this was decades ago, and box cutters have evolved over the years. I had the basic one, which I think is the best one because it's just thin and easy to handle. But when you've worked there for many years, because they're still small, even the more bulkier ones, they're not very big. You're going to pocket them, and you're going to eventually take them home, just what happens. So you'll start to, it's like if your job is you're a secretary or something, you're writing down stuff, and you take pens or pencils home, and now you've got a big collection of pencils and pens or writing whatever. It's the same thing with box cutters, and so I had box cutters at my home, I had box cutters in my car. I just had tons of box cutters because over the years I just, not really on purpose, I would have it in my pocket and go home, and of course they would have a huge box of box cutters that, you can go and, if you don't have one, you can go grab a new one. And so to me, with Alan working in retail, not pharmacist, retail, and he would stock shelves probably as one of his things. And so he would use a box cutter to open up boxes. And so again, this box cutter thing, I think, is huge. I think this could be probably one of the bigger things next to the timeline and bullet. Actually, I think it might even be bigger than the bullet, in my opinion, because if he allegedly admitted to using a box cutter on the girls, and then we find out that, remember, the guy thought that there was a thumb guard. And if you guys missed what I'm talking about, I'll pull it up here and show you guys why the pathologist was thinking serrated, but then thought about a box cutter. And I'll show you guys that. But yeah, so photos, tons of knives. Again, yeah, there's a lot of people that collect knives. I was more interested in the box cutters.
Defense attorney Jennifer Auger said, "It's important to conduct the search in a professional way, especially when it deals with the deaths of 2 young girls." Veto agreed. Yes. Auger referenced a photo of someone handling a bullet found at the scene, asked, "Wouldn't that be unprofessional?" Auger then referenced photos found at Allen's home that show Allen near the Monon High Bridge. Auger asked if Allen's hair was curly. Veto said he did not recall. Augur asked if it was unusual for
Yeah, I don't
hunters
know.
or fishermen to have a lot of knives. Veto said he wasn't sure.
So, again, they had recovered a 40 cal Smith & Wesson Winchester round, unspent, next to Libby's right foot. They say between the bodies, but it was kind of next to Libby's right foot. Unspent bullet. Again, 40 cal Winchester. Now, of course, Winchester, again, I'm not a gun. I hate guns, so I know little to no, I know a little bit about guns, but very, very little. I understand the basics, basically. But they found a 40 cal Winchester brand at the scene. Now, at his home, he had a wooden keepsake box. He had some pictures, I think, and most notably a letter from his mother, and an unspent 40 cal Winchester round. The same kind of brand caliber that was found at the crime scene. Any correlation between the two? And of course, they recovered a Sig Sauer P226 from his was in his nightstand, I believe. And of course, along with many other things, they recovered a blue Carhartt jacket, which they believe could be the same one that was used and seen in the picture. This is the box cutter. For anybody that missed my demonstration yesterday, let me just quickly recap one thing why I think this is huge. So the doctor had noted that he thought maybe there could have been a serrated and a normal blade used, but then he said that when he was at home and looking at his workbench, that it occurred to him that I'm just trying to think. I'm just going to make this a very big neck. Just think of this as the neck. I should have just done this in the circle anyway. Anyway, with Libby, this is obviously with Libby, she had wounds, but she had parallel cuts. And this was the issue, is that they noticed that there would be one more fine line cut, right? But then they noticed there was a parallel one that was more serrated like, right? But they were parallel, very close to each other, right? So they thought it originally, maybe two things were used, two kind of weapons, one serrated, one not. But then when he was looking at his box cutter, it came to him. Sorry, let me... See, did I put on Delphi trial or Delphi trial number 2? Bear with me 1 second while I find this. Here we go. What he then realized is what likely happened is, so here's one, and let me pull up the other one because that one for some reason had a bad quality. Okay, so we see the same box cutter, right? Now, there's so many different kinds of box cutters. This is why I think this is very unique. And if we find out that these are the ones that they use at CVS, to me, that's just another nail in his coffin, in my opinion. So what you've got is this thing here is what's called a thumb guard. Now, of course, when I use box cutters, we didn't have the thumb guard, but they have evolved a lot over the years. But you would place your thumb right here. This gives you more pressure as you're cutting boxes Where before I had a box cutter that did not have that, and so I'd actually, to cut, I used my index finger, pointer finger, and that's where I put pressure and cut, right? But with the thumb, obviously you can get some more pressure. You're closer up. It is a good design. Now, obviously, if we were to flip this so as we were looking at it straight down, there's a gap, obviously, between this blade and this guard. I'm not sure, maybe 1/4 inch, somewhere around in there. I'm not good with measurements, so, but obviously, if you started cutting into somebody with the blade, and if you're trying to dig in, this, even though, this isn't a blade, this is very thin and metal. And if you're digging in, would cut. And notice the tooth mark. The tooth mark. This is the serrated. If you were to, look at a serrated blade, it would have. Oops, what am I doing? It would have basically teeth marks, right? That's kind of what a serrated. Why is it doing that? It would have something like that. That's a serrated cut. So what they notice on Libby is they would notice that she would have these parallel cuts. And then the doctor one day or the pathologist, whatever, was looking and saw in his toolbox that he had a box cutter, and it was one that had a thumb guard on it. And what he thought was probably happening is this one was making the clean cut, while this one, because obviously the blade doesn't stick out very far, and if you were pressing in, obviously this part would start to dig in to the skin, a 1/4 inch, a little bit apart. And so anyway, sorry for that long explanation, but I think it's, in my opinion, I think that's genius. If I was, the pathologist, looking at his workbench and sees this box cutter, I mean, that would be kind of a crazy moment, be like, holy shit, that's probably what happened.
Auger said it was not uncommon for people to carry box cutters.
I'm trying to make it match the prosecution. Well, I'm just reiterating what the expert, who knows much more than I would, the pathologist, I'm just explaining what his thought process was. He's the pathologist, I'm not, but I understand box cutters. Now, not on humans, obviously, but I understand box cutters.
Veto said, "Sure." Auger then said of the phones, "All of these go back years and years." Veto said that was correct.
Yeah, we didn't have thumb guards.
Veto was unsure when asked if having a Sig Sauer gun was unusual. Veto said he believed the blue jacket, taken from Alan's home, was tested.
Yep.
He was not aware of anything from the coat linked to Abby or Libby. Veto also said
he said, keep in mind, he said there's parallel cuts. Parallel cuts. I mean, multiple parallel cuts. It's one thing if you're cutting and maybe you get like an X or something, but if you're getting parallel cuts on your neck, that's like as if two blades are, being used at the same time to get parallel cuts. But he noticed one is cutting the skin differently, basically serrated. They
found no connection in Alan's car or on any of the knives or box cutters. Veto said they also did not find anything missing from the crime scene at Alan's house either. Auger said that if someone is covered in blood when they get in a car, you can test for that, can't you? Veto said it depends on if the blood is dried. Are you saying dry blood can't transfer? Auger asked.
I'm just
The
looking
state's
at chat.
25th witness is Lieutenant.
The other thing I wanted to mention I thought was very fascinating is
Jacket, taken from Alan's home, was tested. He was not aware of anything from the coat linked to Abby or Libby.
Obviously, it's been
Veto also
way too
said
long.
they found no connection in Alan's car or on any of the knives or box cutters. Veto said they also did not find anything missing from the crime scene at Alan's house either.
I would love to see the picture of the box cutters because I'm pretty sure they'll be most likely the same brand. Maybe throughout the time, maybe they order, because usually when you work at a certain place, they're going to have the same type of box cutters, you know, because they'll order them through Uline. That's a pretty known company that has basically all that kind of stuff. And so obviously it would be the same box cutter. And there's so many different brands of box cutters. And in my opinion, a lot of them don't have the thumb guard. They'll have something else, but so if CVS uses the thumb guard type,
Auger said that if someone is covered in blood when they get in a car, you can test for that, can't you? Veto said it depends on if the blood is dried. Are you saying dry blood can't transfer? Auger asked.
So then they also found photos, a photo album of a bunch of pictures at the Monon High Bridge. So what do you know? Of course, that's no surprise. They live 5 minutes away from the Monon High Bridge. Of course, this is a picture of his daughter. Of course, I've edited out the face. But clearly he is familiar with this place, and he knows that that would be a dead end at the end of the trail.
The state's 25th witness is Lieutenant Jerry Holman, who supervised the search warrant on Alan's home.
Oops, I must have had the female AI going through this. So the last witness was Jerry Holman, who supervised the search warrant of Alan's home. There's some very interesting things in this. Alan said he performed the initial walkthrough of the home and waited outside while police performed the search. He sat outside with Alan. Holman said Alan said, "It doesn't matter." So let me just rephrase this. Alan said to Holman while they're waiting and searching, Richard Allen said, "It doesn't matter, it's over," while waiting in the car. And he repeated this. And I don't know why you would say that and repeat it. And then, of course, I know probably they'll say that he made that up. But again, if you think it's corruption, then you're on the wrong channel, because to me, I think that's just such a cop-out. Alan has been his worst own enemy. He has literally told the truth, saying he's there. And basically said he's the killer. I mean, what else do you guys want except for, even if there was a video of Alan killing these girls, it would just be a deep fake. I mean, at this point, But anyway, I thought this was very interesting. What does that mean? It doesn't matter, it's over. To me, that sounds like a guy that knows he's busted.
While waiting in the car. Holman said Alan said that when asked if he wanted to fill out a form for damaged items during the search. During cross-examination, defense attorney Andrew Baldwin asked, "Alan was a suspect at that time?" Holman said, "Yes." Baldwin asked if photography can damage a bullet. Holman said it can, depending on how it's handled.
Yeah, which is kind of weird. So I think that finishes up. So here's just a few shots from yesterday. Now we'll get into today. This is just a quick video recap of yesterday. We've got about 800 people in here. Yeah, I'm sorry. At this point, like I watch all the. No, I don't watch all the channels, of course. But I try to watch to get, because I want to see arguments on the other side. But I don't see anything except it's just corruption, and there's nothing that there's substance. Give me something that, other than, I would agree. Yeah, the witnesses have all described anything but Alan, but they've all described, we know witness statements. I mean, they see him for just a split of a second. And who's to say he wasn't like wearing like a wig, like a curly hair, but other than that, Alan said he's wearing the same thing that is seen on the footage, and he literally says he was there between the time that the murders happened. I mean, it just kind of frustrates you. I'd understand if you're on the fence, but it just, we haven't even gotten to the confessions yet. And again, if he's talking about stuff that the killer would only know, which we know is going to be coming, how else are you going to explain that? I mean, really. Again, and I believe there corruption does happen in certain cases, but in this case, I think, yeah, they messed up as far as not busting Alan in the beginning, and they would have probably had much better evidence, and maybe DNA, but unfortunately that just didn't happen. But yeah, let's play this clip. I'm going to go full screen here for a second so I can turn on my AC here.
That search warrant on Alan's home in October 2022, and Holman testified that when he got to Alan's house, he told him, look, if we mess anything up at your house, you can fill out a form and police will repair it. And Holman told the jury that Richard Allen said, it doesn't matter, it's over. Holman says Richard Allen then sat in a car with Holman and was quiet most of the time, smoked a few cigarettes, and asked Holman if police had detained his wife. Holman testified that he told Richard Allen no and offered to drive Allen to his wife's work. Holman said that Allen replied again for a second time, it doesn't matter, it's over. Lieutenant Holman also showed the jury the gun that they retrieved from Richard Allen's home that day of the search warrant. At that point, that's when we saw the families of both Abby and Libby get pretty emotional. And we also saw some emotion from Richard Allen's wife today, Kathy, when Lieutenant Holman was talking about the search they did of their house that day.
We want to bring in right now Katie Jackson-Lindsay, our 13 News legal analyst. You were also in court with us today. I want to point out the defense pointed out, they reiterated for the jury that Richard Allen voluntarily called the tip line and said that he was at the scene, and he did that just a few days after the murders. What does a jury make of that? And is that something that someone who just committed a double murder would do, calling police to say, I was close to the crime scene?
Well, I think we will hear that this is the type of evidence that can cut both ways. The state will undoubtedly argue that a guilty person would do this in order to cover their tracks. But the defense, I think, is trying to build the idea that a guilty person would never do that. From a common sense standpoint, you wouldn't assert yourself.
I so disagree with this lady. I'm not a big fan of her. She's, to me, in my opinion, from the interviews I've seen, she's more defense. Again, I want to see a fair trial, and I want to see both attorneys make good arguments on both sides. But I so disagree with this last statement. We know, not every time, but we know that killers like to insert themselves into the investigation. We know that. That is something that is just, something that's not common in every case, but that killers do that.
And Holman told the jury that Richard Allen said, it doesn't matter, it's over. Holman says Richard Allen then sat in a car with Holman and was quiet most of the time, smoked a few cigarettes, and asked Holman if police had detained his wife. Holman testified that he told Richard Allen no and offered to drive Allen to his wife's work. Holman said that Allen replied again for a second time, it doesn't matter.
In the defense's own words, an argument they used with Betsy Blair, they said, well, wouldn't her testimony and her memory be better back in 2017 than it was in 2019 or whenever she got interviewed another time? So let me argue their same argument. Wouldn't Allen's memory be better back in 2017 when he said he was there from 1:30 to 3:30 than when he's arrested 5.5 years later, then says he's there from noon to 1:30, right? Wouldn't you use that same argument? Because now it's been 5 years, not just a couple of years. It's been 5 years, but now Now he's for sure, he knows he was there from noon to 1:30, right? Like the logic. Where's the logic in it? He says he's on his phone. He says that both times before in all the interviews, yet he collects most of his phones all the way back to the Nokia days, yet the one phone that's missing is the one from 2017. You don't think that's just slightly sus that particular phone's gone? Probably in a river or in a dump somewhere. And then when they pulled the geofence data, no Richard Allen. He gave his phone number, his ID number to the phone. No Richard Allen. So if he was on a stock ticker on his phone, it's bullshit. Because he wasn't there. Or at least his phone wasn't there, excuse me.
It's over. Lieutenant Holman also showed the jury the gun that they retrieved from Richard Allen.
Now we're on to day 7. Finally caught up. And here we go. I'm going to read this out because my AI, for some reason, I don't know if it didn't like Melissa's last name or something. Now, I don't want to be condescending or, but I just, again, Richard Allen, again, for the most part, I think he's telling 90% of the truth. And people are just passing that off because he said he was there during one of the most traumatic things that have ever happened at Delphi. If you look up Delphi's crime rate, it is like they have like one robbery a year or something like that. It's, because it's just a little town, less than 3,000 people. And a murder is like, happens once a decade or something like that. I don't know, maybe more than that. But, this kind of stuff doesn't happen, especially on this kind of scale. And we know Richard Allen, although there's no connection between Abby and Libby that we know of that Richard Allen had looked up before, when they looked up what he had searched on his phones that they could look at, he did research Abby and Libby's murder. So if he was an innocent witness, why didn't he come forward, when they were asking about who parked at the CPS building? Clearly, if he allegedly left at 1:30, he would have ran right into Bridge Guy. Again, it doesn't add up. Thank you, Jamie. Okay. Oh yeah, I forgot. I got to read this out because the AI I wasn't liking this. All right, so today we have former firearm examiner Melissa Oberg. I think it ends with the T, but they forgot to put the T in. Worked 17 years for ISP. She would inspect bullets, firearms, and cartridges. She would also test firearm operation and perform tool mark examinations. And I'm going to play a video as well for you guys to explain everything. And I love how this channel put this in here. Tool marks are how the magic bullet near Abby and Libby's body was allegedly tied to a firearm owned by Richard Allen. She's a member of the NAFATME, National Association of Firearm and Tool Mark Examiner. This is her 112th court case she has testified in. So she is no amateur. She's been doing this a long time. According to Oberg, state examiners must pass annual proficiency tests. Oberg explained that the tool mark examination is based on observation. Now, I will admit that the little bit of research that I did, from what I had seen, there's not a lot. I'm sure maybe there's more if I deep dive and have more time. But from what I understand, I think it's a kind of a case-to-case. When it comes to the extraction thing, when a bullet is fired, that's much easier to identify and match, that is more commonly known. But when you're just examining the ejector extractor marks, there's a little bit more, you can have more issues. but still at the same time, it's still the same preference that it's, you're microscopically looking at marks that are left by the gun itself, and we'll look at what leaves these marks. She explained these tool mark examinations based on observation, said it's harder of two objects that come into force. She said the harder of two objects that come into forceful contact with another will result in a softer object being marked. She said that two types of tool marks, impressed and striated. She also describes parts of the cartridge, which is also kind of the bullet, more or less. And it's made up of three main components: the primer, the case, and the bullet. Obviously, the gun, if when fired, would hit the primer, which then gunpowder in the case. So the case holds the gunpowder, ignites, and what comes out is this bullet gets obviously ejected at very high speeds, and then the case itself gets ejected out. Now, obviously, in this case, the gun wasn't fired, but just ejected. Oberg also explained how a cartridge is cycled through a firearm, which we're going to show here in just 1 second. With the semi-automatic handgun, you pull on the slide part of the handgun to cycle a cartridge to prepare to fire it. So basically, if you were to take a firearm without a clip, also referred to as a magazine, you put the magazine in, and to put a round in the chamber, you would obviously cycle it with the slide, and that would put a live round now in the chamber. Now, from what we understand is when Bridge Guy was walking up to the girls, to intimidate them, he had cycled it, now putting a live round into the chamber, and probably forgot that he did that. And then when he got over across the creek, maybe there was something that happened, because something happened, and we'll probably hear something about that in the confession, because something interrupted him, and I'm assuming he tried to intimidate him again by cycling it and forgetting that there was already a live round in it. And what would happen if he cycles it and there's a live round? That one gets ejected out. And so we'll see how that process works. So Alberg demonstrated this process for the jurors using a dummy cartridge from the ISP labs and a real handgun. Explain the kinds of marks that are left on cartridges, including lands and grooves. These are called class characteristics. She described the different elements that can be used to disqualify certain cartridges from certain firearms. For example, the caliber of the cartridge must match the firearm. So obviously the caliber, again, I'm not a gun expert and I hate guns, but you would need a 40 caliber pistol to shoot 40 caliber rounds. That's basically what they're saying. Albert said subclass characteristics are features that can be produced during manufacture that are not consistent among some items made by the same tool at the same time. These are not determined prior to the manufacture and are more restrictive than class characteristics. Oberg said there are then individual characteristics. These are the random imperfections and irregularities of a specific tool's surface. They can come from use, abuse, or corrosion. Oberg used the example of a dent in a car's door being unique to that specific car, and not every car of that make and model. That's a pretty good explanation. All right. Yep. Give me 1 second, Jennifer. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, Olivia, if you would like to help out Maud, just let me know. We can set you up for just to help out while we're doing the Richard Allen case if you want. Just let me know, Olivia. So Oberg walked the jury through the analysis and how the analysis is done. And of course, I've got a video for you guys for those that are not experts in firearms like myself. But basically, she says there's level 1, level 2, accessing the condition of evidence, looking at the class characteristics, test fire a firearm multiple times to see what the inside looks like, using a comparison microscope to compare multiple objects simultaneously to find individual characteristics. Jurors were shown the evidence sent to the ISP crime lab. Oberg explained that before analyzing tool marks, the cartridge is checked for DNA. They didn't find any DNA or fingerprints. Oberg called the tool mark exams DNA and fingerprint destroyers. The tool mark. Oh, so I guess that's why they obviously check for DNA and fingerprints, because when they then use their tools, it would destroy the DNA and or fingerprint. Oberger said the cartridge from the crime scene was in good condition, said there were 3 ejector marks and 3 extractor marks on the cartridge. So let me just say that one more time. Oberg said the cartridge from the crime scene, the bullet, unspent bullet found next to Libby's foot, was in good condition. Obviously, they found it on February 14th. It was likely ejected out on the 13th, so it had only been sitting in the ground for less than 24 hours. So there was no, kind of any kind of elements that would have kind of, damaged the bullet in any way. Okay. All right. So I got a video here kind of showing this. I think it's now. Oh, it's coming up. So the jury just heard that the tool marks expert testified that her testing concluded that a pistol seized from Richard Allen's home cycled the cartridge found between the bodies of Abby and Libby at the crime scene. So basically, the bullet found at the crime scene had, because it was extracted, and we'll see a video here in a second, it leaves these really microscopic marks on it when it ejects that are unique to that gun. And when they had taken a bullet and did the same thing with Allen's gun, it left similar marks. And according to her, they matched. Oberg shows jury a PowerPoint presentation that came to the conclusion that the gun collected from Allen's home in 2022 had indeed cycled the cartridge that was found near the bodies of Libby and Abby. Oberg tested another cartridge with a gun found in Allen's home to see if the tool marks would match. She showed the jury 5 images of the test cartridge compared to the cartridge at the scene. She told the jury that several marks were in agreement, because it leaves more than one mark. So obviously they're not just testing one little dent, little slit, that it leaves multiple unique little identifiers. Oberg testified the cartridge at the scene had not been fired, but that the test cartridge had been fired. She told the jury there was research to back up doing it that way. And of course, this is a little bit beyond my expertise. Yeah, I think that will probably come sometime next week. I think because tomorrow will be a short 3 hour day, I think. Um, so here
What
is
is the
the video.
difference between an extractor and an
So now that bullet had been fired, but it's more or less the same concept. Give me 1 second, guys. Let me put this full screen so I can get Olivia set up. But here is, for anybody that's wondering what the hell we're talking about or what she's talking about, here's an example.
ejector, and what does each one do in a semi-auto and an AR-15? The difference between an ejector and extractor in a semi-automatic pistol. So after a round is fired, the job of the extractor and ejector is to remove the now empty brass casing that is in the chamber in order to load the next round. The extractor is basically a hook, which is right here, that hooks on to the back edge of the brass casing, and that looks like this. The hook is hooked into the notch in the back of the brass casing. When the slide retracts, you can pull that brass casing or extract it right out of the chamber. And then the ejector comes into play. As the slide continues to move back, the ejector, which is here, it pushes the brass casing and ejects it right out of the gun. Just a couple other examples of what it looks like. Here is a 1911, and this is the extractor. It's got the little hook on it, and here is the ejector. Here is a Glock 17, and here is the extractor, and here is the rather aggressive ejector in this gun. One more example, I have a Springfield XDM here, and once again the extractor is over here, the hook, and the ejector. Just to show you on the Springfield how they're mounted, the ejector is almost always mounted right on the frame, and that's stationary. So it's when the slide moves back, the ejector is in the groove, and the ejector slides up and pushes out the brass. So if we look right here, there's a dummy round I have in here, and what happens when this gets loaded, the slide comes forward, and you'll see what happens. The round is forced up, and the extractor hooks on to the rear of the brass right here. It's grabbed onto the little piece right there, so it's got a hold of that piece of brass. When the gun is fired.
So let me just go back real quick here, right?
How they're
get
mounted.
this top view here.
The ejector is almost always mounted right
So you have two things that are going to leave marks, from what I understand,
on the frame, and that's stationary. So it's when the slide moves back, the ejector is in the groove, and the ejector slides up and pushes out the brass. So if we look right here, there's a dummy round I have in here, and what happens when this gets loaded, the slide comes forward.
See this little this thing here. So you have the ejector and the extractor, and the one holds it. This little extra rim part, kind of like a lip that's at the end of the bullet, and it hooks into that. And so what happens is when it gets ejected out, it will leave striations, marks that are very microscopic, and through use of the guns, they will leave different kinds of grooves because it's very microscopic, and usually guns will have, unique striations that are left on the bullet. And so according to the expert, of course, they just had the bullet found at the crime scene that had obviously already had the striations on it because it had already been ejected out. Then they placed a a bullet into the gun recovered at Richard Allen's home. Placed, obviously, a bullet similar, not the original, obviously one found at the crime scene. And then did the same thing, racked it, and let it eject out, which would obviously then leave striations. And then they would compare the two to see if those two striations and tool marks left by the extractor ejector would match up. They are very microscopic. It would be interesting for the public to see them, because I believe in transparency, but maybe that will be well after the trial is over and we get Freedom of Information Act, so we can actually see these markings.
And you'll see what happens. The round is forced up, and the extractor hooks onto the rear of the brass right here. It's grabbed onto the little piece right there. So it's got a hold of that piece of brass. When the gun is fired, the slide goes backward, pulls that brass out with it, and then when it goes all the way back, it hits the ejector, which flips it out of the gun. And then it grabs onto the new round and does the same thing.
And so you can see he's racking it multiple times there.
The dummy round is into this ejector, and it kind of catapults it or ejects it right out of the gun. And
there's just one last thing here. So he's going to slow motion. So this is likely what had happened is, obviously now the live round is in the chamber, and so if you were to rack it again, the live round would get ejected out, and it's likely maybe the killer forgot that he had racked it before, and so it just gets knocked out, and that causes the striations markings on the bullet. And so that was likely what happened.
Extractor and ejector.
And it probably, maybe he even noticed it, but because it went into the dirt, he probably couldn't find it. And then, of course, I'm sure maybe this is before he attacked them, and then after attacking them, he probably forgot about it and was trying to cover up the scene. Who knows? Obviously, that's all speculation from there. Ray Marie becoming a member and supporting this channel. Thank you so much. God bless you. I really appreciate that. It helps support this channel. We spend a lot of time doing visuals and going through a bunch of different reports so we can get as much info from this trial as much as we can, since there's no videos or transcripts. And Sensei, I'm sorry I missed your $2 euro earlier, and thank you so much for helping mod. And then we've got Don Spain. Good to see you. It's been a while. Chris, good work, buddy. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Don Spain. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well, and God bless you for the support. Yeah, it sounds like obviously she's been up there. We're gonna see what, I'm sure by the time once we're almost caught up to lunch, and I'm sure there'll be more notes that I haven't seen yet. So she further says she tested 2 additional firearms, one Smith & Wesson model 40 cal that did not have similar characteristics. The second, the 6 Hour pistol, which did have similar characteristics, but the subclass characteristics did not carry over. She said the findings were inconclusive at the time. Oberger said she fired 8 cycles of the gun in a water tank. Oberg said they always test fire, even if the cartridge was cycled without firing, to see if they can learn more. So I'm assuming they eventually fired the bullet that was used, that was found, to see if they can find any more details. Maybe they fired that bullet and then another bullet from his gun to see what else they could determine. I'm assuming. I could be wrong. Of course, they found the 6 Hour P226 pistol. one Winchester 40 caliber cartridge, which was in the wooden keepsake box. That was the same kind of model found at the crime scene. So, that's just maybe some crazy coincidence, or maybe that there's a story behind this bullet that he decided to keep in a wooden keepsake box. Now, they also noted that there was another brand, Blazer 40 caliber cartridge he had, also with 2 magazines with the 40 caliber. Thank you so much, Kat. Yeah, we just went over that too, Shay. If you missed it, literally just go back like 5 minutes. And that explains exactly how the bullet, it doesn't really just fall out the gun. It actually kind of extracts it out a little bit of ways. Like some ejectors they're all different. Some will kind of kick it back one way. Usually it kicks out, but some may kick it out and back. Some may just kick it out to the right. But obviously away from the person that's shooting. That way they're not getting hit with like a hot, just spent round that's probably, I'm sure, hot. So Oberger said they received evidence 5.5 years later from the crime scene cartridge. Oberger said after testing Richard Allen's 6 Sawyer P226, the ejector marks matched. Let me just repeat that. Matched those found at the cartridge near Abby and Libby's body. The ejector marks matched. This is under very microscopic, obviously something that you wouldn't be able to see with the naked eye, because each ejector, as it gets worn, will obviously, leave different striations, very microscopic to the bullet. So it would be something to the effect of, actually, let me use this. Make this big. We would have, so obviously we'd have, oops, wrong color. We'd have our bullet that's going to get ejected out. But then we would have the back part. I know that's not the best, but obviously the ejector, or extractor, one of the two, I think the ejector clips onto this, and then we have the extractor, and then basically as they get worn, obviously they'll leave striations somewhere that are very unique, to the bullet, and then they would match. And of course it wouldn't be here, but I'm just trying to show an example. There would be very unique striations that are very microscopic, and if they did that with another bullet and they notice that it's using, had the same little markings on it, then they could tell that that bullet was ejected from the same gun. Obviously, that's just a very basic example. Oberger showed images of inside the gun to identify what made the marks, which I just showed you. The ejector, there's two things, the ejector and the extractor, which marks under the rim of the cartridge. So the extractor, this thing here, which holds on to the lip of the back of the bullet, that will make grooves as it gets ejected out. And then you have the, let's see, let me make sure I got the right one. and then the ejector, which is somewhere around here, that kicks it out. So the bullet goes flying out this way, away from the person. And that too would leave marks. Very microscopic markings. Mary says why they couldn't have tested an identical gun model and bullet to see if it compares different or makes the same marking. Again, I don't want to get quote too much, because again, this is really again, I'm not a gun person. I've just had a former person that I knows a lot about guns explain it to me a long time ago, so it's been a while. So I'm not sure everything. Of course, I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more. And of course, we'll recap tomorrow, more about what happened today. And maybe we'll get that answer. Okay, so let's play this clip here. And then let's see, because obviously when I started my live, they were at lunch, or I think just maybe getting back. So I'm sure there's more updates. So let's see what they have to say here, and then we'll check the live blog.
It's a midday break in the Delphi murders trial. Prosecutors are bringing out the best piece of physical evidence they have linking Richard Allen to the murders of Abby Williams and Libby German, an unfired .40 caliber round. So far today, jurors have heard the testimony of an Indiana State Police firearms expert. And CBS 4's Russ McQuaid was in the courtroom. Russ, the defense is promising to challenge that evidence and that expert.
Yes, her name is Melissa Oberg. She was a state police forensic firearms examiner at the time of the murders in 2017, and she told jurors this morning that within just a couple of days of those murders, February 13th, 2017, in her lab she started receiving evidence, two significant pieces. One was that .40 caliber bullet discovered out at the crime scene, and the other a .22 caliber gun we've never heard of before. Investigators claim it was a pristine, unfired .40 caliber Winchester Smith & Wesson cartridge that was slightly buried in the dirt beneath the body of Abby Williams, not far from the north bank of Deer Creek, and that they matched that with another bullet and a handgun, a .40 caliber handgun, found during the search of a search warrant at Richard Allen's house more than 5 years later, and of course that led to the arrest of Allen for the murders. The former ISP forensic examiner testified that by the time the bullet entered her lab, it had already been dusted for DNA and fingerprints. The bullet was not weathered or corroded like it had been outside for a long time. There were 3 ejector marks on the base, and the jurors were shown a close-up photograph of those marks. Oberg also said that on the same day, February 17, 2017,
so he just said there's 3 ejector marks that were made just from the ejector itself. Remember, there's the extractor and the ejector. They each leave certain marks. Maybe 3, maybe 2. There's a little way out of my wheelhouse, but he just said it leaves 3 unique. So maybe 1 extractor ejector would leave 3 certain types. Maybe 1 would leave 2 that are maybe more just straight. Again, it all comes down to the microscopic way that they would match. 1 would maybe be kind of like that. And if they notice that it was the same thing, then they're like, okay, that definitely matches. If they tested 2 bullets, one that already had the striations on it, and it was like this, and then they took the gun that they believe was used, and then they used a fresh unspent bullet and then ejected it, and it left something like this, then they'd be like, okay, well, these don't match, and that's not the handgun that was used. again, sorry for my design there. Touche. No, the gun was never fired. The guy, what they did is just racked it again. Racking is just like if you're going to load the bullet into the chamber for it to be fired. But if you rack it again, it'll eject that live round out because that's what happens.
She received a Glock 22 caliber handgun to examine.
And it's believed he did that because he was trying to intimidate them, just like he did when he was on the bridge. You can hear him what they refer to as cocking the gun, which is racking the gun, putting a live round in to obviously scare these poor little girls. And then it seems like he may have forgotten that he did that on the bridge. And he did it again when maybe he was trying to get them to undress or whatever. And then, of course, a bullet would get ejected out. All right. Let's see what's happened since we started live, because that was a lot to go over. And let's look at the blogs. Today's day 7. All right, let's get caught
Loved ones
up.
Taken too soon.
All right. So nothing new on that one. Let's see about, is this day 7 or day 6? This is day 6. I know I bookmarked these. There we go. There's day 7. We want this one here. Here we go. Oh, okay. So there is an update. Let's see. That says 3:54. Okay, because right now it's so that's about 4 p.m. So this was updated about 20 minutes ago. So it said court is back in session at 1:14. Reports only 15 of the 16 jurors came back into the courtroom after lunch. It's unclear why the number changed. That's interesting. Maybe there was a family emergency. Prosecution plays a video of how the Sig Sauer pistols are made. The video explains how the barrel slide frame are made. Former ISP examiner Melissa Oberg, boy, they keep misspelling her name, continues her testimony. When asked about how she determined the gun Allen had cycled the cartridge found on the scene, Oberg responded, based on sufficient agreement between the quality and quantity of marks. Oberg told the jury the verification process involves another examiner looking and comparing and having them come to their own conclusions. So this isn't just one person doing their work and saying, okay, I feel this is, what I've concluded. They have, sounds like other people come in and check the work. Oberg says she did not stand over and watch the second examiner's verification process. Oberg said her supervisor did the verification process and was able to verify the cartridge had been cycled. He agreed it was identification. So, to me, in my opinion, that's pretty huge that we have somebody which sounds like her supervisor, coming in and doing an independent verification of the process and coming to the same conclusion that this bullet that had been cycled came from the same gun. Now we have the defense attorney, Brad Rosie, begins his cross-examination. All right. Okay, and we know Rosie, for those that may not know, so we have the three defense attorneys, Bradley Rosie, Andrew Baldwin, and Jennifer Auger. Now, if you were to go with good cop, bad cop kind of routine, you would have Baldwin as the good cop and Rosie as kind of like the bad cop. Not saying he's a bad person, he's just kind of more, from what we've heard, he's a little bit more aggressive. Rosie calls into question the definition of sufficient agreement between the marks on the cartridge from the crime scene and the test cartridge. Rosie reads the definition of sufficient. Okay. Oberg tells the jury that the word means something different in her industry. Oh, okay. Which is true. Rosie references the video and says it does not reference extractors or ejectors. He asks Oberg if she knows how many gun manufacturers there are in the U.S. Oberg responds that she doesn't want to guess, that there is black market stuff going on. Rosie asks Oberg, "Your current job has nothing to do with firearms, does it?" She responds, "It does not." Oberg says she works in healthcare data now. Oberg tells the jury she focused on identification exclusion and a particular firearm interacted with a projectile bullet. She says, "I did not come to an incorrect conclusion." Rosie says Oberg said to law enforcement during the investigation that firearm identification is as reliable as paternity testing. That's pretty strong. Oberg said that is not the case. Oh, wait. Oh, okay, sorry. Now I understand how that was worded. So Rosie is implying Oberg said to law enforcement during the investigation that firearm identification is reliable as a paternity test. She said that is not the case. Rosie says that PCAST, the Council Advisor of Science and Technology, has been studying if the toolmark industry is valid science. Oberg said that in 2016, PCAST concluded that the industry needed more studies. Rosie said the National Academy of Sciences has also criticized the industry and that the NAS called for more research to prove the reliability of toolmark industry. Oberg says pressure is what is different in cycling versus firing. Rosie says there is little research on cycling versus firing process. Oberg says the markings associated with firing a firearm is consistent with fired rounds. Excuse me. Rosie confirms with Oberg that the fired round that was used to draw her conclusion on Allen's pistol. Okay, Rosie confirms that Oberg that the fired round was used to draw her conclusion on Allen's pistol. Oberg confirms there were 3 ejector marks, 3 extractor marks on the cartridge found at the crime scene. Rosie says not nearly as much as you might find on a fired round, correct? Rosie says Oberg had not examined the cartridges under a microscope before testing. Interesting. Wonder why they didn't put that up above this. That's weird. So that is the latest. And
Are you skeptical of headlines and what you see on social media?
okay, let's see what we got in the Reddit. Have we got anything else in here? So here is the update about the jurors, only 15 returning. One of the 4 alternate jurors did not return after today's testimony, trying to get clarification if the juror had been dismissed. Ooh. Let's hope that's not the case. Alternate jurors. Anyway, let's see what you guys are saying. Sassfire says it's comparable to fingerprints. No 2 guns leave the same micro marks. Yeah, again, this comes down to microscopic, marks that are left on the bullet when they are extracted or fired from the gun. And yeah, both will leave unique microscopic markings. Exactly. Wait, I thought there was 2 different groups of girls, one group of 4, one group of 3. Maybe I misunderstood. No, there was just one group, and I could see why you get confused with that, because Alan said he ran into 3 girls, and in the PCA they talk about 3 girls, even though there was 4. And yeah, there's only one group of girls, the juveniles, again, and this is why it's just so huge when it comes down to just the basic timeline. But there was 4 of them. There was Brianna Wilbur, Anna Spath, which I guess she's not being called, but she also saw him. You have Riley Voorhees. She testified along with Brianna. And then you had Riley's younger sister. I don't know her name, but obviously she was the younger sister, probably the youngest. They were all obviously in, juveniles at the time. So Richard Allen only mentions seeing 3 girls. It's possible that one of the sisters was behind the other group of 3 girls, or maybe even kind of wandered off for a second when he was walking past. But yeah, there was 4 girls there that day during that time period. And again, they are really huge witnesses because they had taken pictures at certain times. And they were basically on the bridge from noon to like 1:30, maybe 1:40, as they were leaving across over here. So yeah, and it seems like Andrew knows a bit about firearms. Again, I'm not a gun person. I'm just not a fan of them, just period. But I've been spoken with somebody that's clearly much more knowledgeable about firearms, and we talked about this very scenario about the extractor marks and all that stuff. So again, that's basically the 2 things: the ejector or the extract. I always get them mixed up. The extractor and the ejector, and again, they each will leave a mark on the bullet, and they'll leave little marks on them that they kind of groove into the bullet itself. And obviously the one that was found at the scene had already been ejected out. So they already have, basically a bullet that already has some kind of marks on it. And then when they recover Richard Allen's gun, they take another bullet, similar caliber, obviously same caliber, not similar. And then they perform the same test. And then they see if those striations match the one that's on the original that was found at the scene. And if they do, then, Richard Allen has an issue. Now, the defense is going to claim that the extractor ejector science is not as sound as if you were to match a fired bullet, which there's much more science behind it. They've been, obviously matching spent rounds. That's been, a more proven science, whereas the ejector extractor stuff, I guess, is a little bit more not as sound, I guess, because it hasn't been as used as much or studied, I guess. Again, that's stuff I'm talking is really out of my wheelhouse, but it's kind of what I understand from what they're saying. But again, if the striations match, if they match, I mean, again, that's just another thing that doesn't look good for Allen, in my opinion. So let's just go over some of the stuff and then we'll finish up here. So these are some of the main things. Of course, I could come up with a lot more, but we have, let me take a sip here because I'm starting to lose my voice here. We have Richard Allen's own timeline. Remember, even according to the defense, back in 2017, February 16th, Richard calls in saying that he was there from 1:30 to 3:30 and says he sees 3 girls there at the Freedom Bridge, and that matches what the witnesses say. They had seen a guy at that particular time at technically 1:38 pass by him. Then we have bullet matches the same brand and caliber. We're not even talking about the markings, even though it is a kind of a popular brand. And according to the expert, matches the marks that come from the gun. Again, we have no alibi, no phone evidence, yet he collects all of his phones except for the one that's from 2017. Claims he was there. His car is seen on camera, a black Ford Focus. Worked at CVS in retail, used box cutters. The pathologist believes that a box cutter was used, or is likely a possibility was used. And then we haven't got to, which I'm assuming will be probably maybe next week, confessed over 60 plus times, which will give details only the killer would know, such as who, what, why, and how. So we still have all that still to go over. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he used to. Yeah, which is just truly terrible. Those poor girls. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, with the juror may have had. Let's see. Let's check Twitter real quick. See if maybe there's an update on the juror real quick here, and then we're gonna pretty much finish up, and then tomorrow. If they did what they did last Saturday, I think they just did like a 3-hour day, 4-hour day. So it may be pretty short. Let's see what Angela says here. Doesn't look like she's even at the trial today. Okay. Okay, so 44 minutes till they one of the alternate jurors trying to get. Okay, so that was posted pretty recently. So maybe we'll find out maybe tonight or maybe tomorrow. So yeah, 10 minutes. If you guys have any questions or you want me to show something. What? Wait, we know why? Yeah, apparently that's in one of the confessions. And it's actually been kind of talked about that it was at least the motivation, which was obviously SA, which I don't think is going to be too much of a surprise. Oh, thank you so much, Jamie. I appreciate that. Redbone says with two experts agreeing. Yeah, because even though the defense is saying, oh, well, now she was working in healthcare, she had another person, her supervisor, do her own examination and came to the same conclusion. So you have basically two experts coming to the same conclusion. And again, and to me, I really don't even think the bullet is like, to me, I think the confessions are going to be the biggest thing. That's just my opinion. I know, Yorkshire. I know we were talking about this. Oh man, I know that word Peru. And the fact that Alan, or the killer, was there walking with a purpose, like he knew where these girls were going to be.
Alan would even...
And the fact then Betsy Blair says that when she sees him on the first platform, she even mentions that it's like he's waiting or looking for someone, or I think it was waiting for someone, which is very interesting observation, you know. And then here you have the girls showing up minutes later after he arrived. So yeah, there's still some theories that there's still some kind of connection between Klein and Richard, because obviously the Kleins are based out of Peru, or at least Kagan Klein and the family. And yeah, it is. It's really odd that he went to his mother's in Peru, and then from there went to the bridge. Which is just, yeah, very interesting. I mean, I'm basically kind of phrasing who, what, where, and how, basically, as in that's what they allege is in the confessions. And that was talked about somewhat in the hearing in July. And it was mentioned in the opening statements as well. Which unfortunately was cut short because I think they couldn't get their video to work, so it was only 15 minutes. But yeah, I don't think it would be a surprise that it was a sexually motivated attack, considering, you know, they were both derobed at some point. Yeah, over 60 confessions, which I think we'll probably start to hear next week at some point. Yeah, that's what a lot of people think, is there was some kind of dark web stuff going on. The only argument to that is that, you know, because we know that there's people that work in that department and search for that stuff, and not to say it couldn't be there, because I have no experience or know how to dark web, but other than just knowing it exists, But we know obviously there's cybercrime and stuff like that. But yeah, maybe it could be out there. Who knows if, that was the case. There was definitely, yeah, Debbie, there was definitely something that happened. And, well, I'm assuming that's going to be in one of the confessions, because that was what the prosecution mentioned, that he said the word interrupted. He was interrupted. And the only person that would know that they were interrupted would be the killer, or Richard Allen. So obviously that had to have come from the confession. I don't know who else would know that information except for the killer and the two girls. Obviously the girls are not alive, so yeah, we'll eventually hear what that's all about. Oh yeah, Kat, the Odinism. I'd say let them go for it. To me, I think they have a very smart group of jurors. I think they're very responsible. They're asking questions. And I think they're going to see through the BS. And we know that the defense has been caught writing bad checks. They even tried it in opening statements, when they were picking the jury, making this big thing like, there's hair found in Abby's hand that's not linked to Richard Allen. They used that in their mini opening defense statement, and it sounded huge. And then, of course, days later, we find out it's a female hair, and most likely is from Libby's family, because that sweatshirt that Abby had on was washed, of course, because it's Libby's, washed just before she put it on, with other clothes with the family, and hair's probably transferred. And yeah, so it just, if they do that, the defense, the jurors are going to see that, and that they're just going to lose credibility if they continue that route. Oh, I see. Yeah, Jake Pauls. At first I was like, what do you mean two sets of girls? Yeah. Yeah, I'll just leave that up there for a minute. I mean, I don't want to say corrupt, but, I don't know. When they said that the girls were abducted and then taken back to the same place, I don't know. I think, I don't know. Just some of this stuff I wish maybe they would think about logically, in my opinion, before. I would have just said, if I was the defense, I would have just said, everything happened the way the prosecution say it is. It's just not my client. And maybe switched around a few things, but, the fact that they're trying to say that they were abducted and brought back, and then the onus thing, it's like they're just making this really tough, difficult thing that just logic kind of goes out the window at some point, and the jurors are going to see right past it, in my opinion. Yeah, so tomorrow, we'll probably go live, maybe the same time, maybe an hour earlier. We'll have to see. I'll have to look back and see what their time was, because they were done, I think, when I went live Saturday. So, but it'll be around the same time, either 2 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. 1 or 2 p.m. Eastern, somewhere around in that time. And it'll only be a short live, so But yeah. Oh no, I have to be careful, choose my words carefully. Sometimes it's emotion, and that's a lot. Obviously this is a very emotional case. It's a very terrible thing that happened to these two girls, and again, I think most people I would at least agree that they want justice for these two girls, but I think using corruption and stuff is an easy cop out. Not to say that it doesn't happen, but I just feel like there's just enough, in my opinion, enough evidence to put him on the map way above everybody else. I don't think anybody else comes close to the stuff that they have on Richard Allen. Well, no, not even in the daylight. Remember now, if you're going with their new theory, this is why I think they're gonna trip themselves, because Redbone, now they're saying that they're abducted, and then they're brought back just before 4 a.m. Remember, it's pitch black. The people searching for these girls had flashlights out, so. Which means they'd have to be going back there with flashlights to bring these girls down the hill, kill them, undress them. Then clearly they would have known that the phone, because according to the defense, that they turn on their phone and lay it under the body before they leave. God knows why you would do that. I think in 2017, I would think they would know that, cell phones can be tracked, and it just, again, the logic goes out the window with it. But anyway, don't get me started on that stuff. I'll keep going. I'm losing my voice, so I'm gonna get out of here. I'll be back tomorrow. I'll kind of recap what happened the rest of today, and then we'll cover obviously day 8, and then we'll get a break finally. So I just want to say thank you to my wonderful mods. Olivia, thank you also coming in and helping out. And then thank you to everybody that could donate. It really helps this channel, because I spend a lot of time putting this stuff together for you guys. So God bless you guys. And we're going to play the outro, and we will see you guys tomorrow.